Welcome to this episode of the Heartbeat for Hire podcast. I feature Olympians, CEOs, disruptors, authors, professional athletes, and the best of the best, where they share their stories of resilience with my lens on leadership and culture. Let's get started. Greetings and welcome to this episode of Heartbeat for Hire. Our guest is a delightful human. Dr. Joey Faucette is a positive culture architect, executive coach, and best-selling author of numerous books, including his latest, Small Hinges Swing Big Doors. Dr. Joey empowers individuals and companies to attract top talent, reduce team turnover, and develop people, productivity, and profits. He hosts the Work Positive podcast weekly, of which I am a guest. Dr. Joey has appeared on as a guest on hundreds of radio and TV shows across North America and most major markets. As a prolific writer of over 1,000 articles, his content has appeared on the websites of Fox News, CNBC, Wall Street Journal, MarketWatch, MSNBC, Entrepreneur.com, and countless others, and in more than 50 countries. I could go on. Welcome to the show, Dr. Joey.
Well, all you really need to say is, I'm your friend.
How and about you that? Are. I didn't get to say that part.
Thing.
Yes, and he's my friend. So welcome. So for those who haven't met you yet, will you give a little background and share your story?
Oh, yeah, sure. A little background and share my story. Now, I'm obviously from the South. I'm not, well, some people think I'm from Boston, but
I don't know anyone that thinks that, but you know.
What's always funny is whoever I'm talking to around the world, they're always like, you have such an interesting accent. And I'm like, you don't have one at all now, do you? So obviously reared, as we say in the South. How did I get into this line of work is a question a lot of people ask. What prompted me to really focus in on positive work culture and creating positive work culture? The short answer is I was in a work culture that sucked.
That's how we all get there.
Yeah. And I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. I am not in North Carolina anymore. So actually I still was, but it didn't resemble Kansas either. And so what happened, Lynn, was I felt myself taking on those qualities and characteristics. So when I finally was released from that prison, I went to another one, and I ascended into a management position, and guess who I was acting like?
Yep.
I refer to it as Kevin culture.
Right.
Lynn, now why do people, why people say it was a Kevin culture? That was not my boss's name, who was such terror. It was actually a client's boss's name, and she kept going on and on and on and on and on about her horrible work culture, and we've heard all those stories before, but for her, it was personal and real. And so I just got tired of hearing her say, that man, because I heard Batman every time she said that, and that just took me down a whole nother alley. So I said, well, what is that man's name? Kevin. I mean, it was like venom was dripping from her words. So I'm like, okay. So Kevin culture is what I refer to it as. And so I found myself acting like Kevin and looked at the man in the mirror one day, didn't recognize him and really didn't like him. So I said, okay, we're going to find a different gear here. So I did. And then just began this fascinating lifelong journey, probably over 30 years, 35 years now, of what is it that makes for a positive work culture? How do people find meaning, purpose, satisfaction? The buzzword today is engagement in their work. And what's the purpose of work anyway? Why do we work besides the fact that we overbought when it came to a home? So, I mean, everybody's overbought if you bought anything in the last 18 months to 2 years. So what do we do? How do we find expressiveness through our work for innovation, creativities, and the kinds of things that gets us out of bed in the morning?
So you said so much that I want to dig in on there, but I think the first one is what you described, your evolution of Kevin to not Kevin, or Kevin to Dr.
Unkevin.
Joey.
That's what I call him. Unkevin.
Unkevin. So, I mean, that takes a fair amount of self-awareness. And I think there has certainly been a lot of leaders, I call them, if you subscribe to the ogre style of leadership, and then you all of a sudden recognize it's time for a change, taking those steps is really hard. And especially if you've broken the trust of your team. So did you do that in one specific culture? Did you leave a company and go off on your own, or what was that transition like?
Boy, there's a question I can be really transparent about, and I have been more so recently because now I've been married 41 years to the same woman, by the way. I'm convinced that pain is a great opportunity to learn and grow from. Not that I wake up in the morning and go, hey, hope I have a headache today so I can learn. No.
And I learned from that. It's my oxygen.
Yeah. Well, I'm from the South, so it's bourbon.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, it's okay. What happened for me was I took that management style into a new position, and
same company, different company.
After I got do what?
Same company or different company?
Different company. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I went from the first Kevin culture into another culture, mm-hmm. and I brought Kevin with me. And we can talk about how there are Kevins everywhere. But I brought Kevin with me in here, and it resulted, I got married while I was there, and bringing Kevin with me resulted in me getting fired 1 week after my honeymoon.
Ooh, that's smart.
Yeah, and so a great way to learn humility is to come off your honeymoon, and then at the end of your first week of work back, get fired, and then have to come home and tell your brand new wife of 2 weeks, guess what happened to me today?
Yeah, which had to scare the bejesus out of her too.
Yeah, well, it did both of us, because Lyndsay, we were young. We were like 23. And
but lucky you to learn that lesson that early, because most leaders don't learn that lesson until they've been in their career for 10, 15, 20 years. And by then, by then their habits are so ingrained, they don't know anything else. And to change feels unsurmountable. So
it does. And I didn't change immediately, by the way. It wasn't like I woke up the next day and it's the new and improved.
I'm going to work positive.
Yeah. That's right. No, I was just looking for work.
Yeah.
Because I had rent to pay, and I still like to eat then. So even though when you're first married, you're not sure you have to eat, right? But it was an amazing opportunity for me to transform and to be transformed and to seek out opportunities to transform. Now, fortunately, I had learned how to be resilient from earlier in my life, from really a 9-year-old. So I knew I could push through. I just had to get better clarity about where I was going. So it was a marvelous opportunity for me to look back and think, okay, who were my leaders that were and business owners that I worked for? I was in radio broadcasting. Who were the owners that I worked for that really invested in me and taught me well? So I went back to them and said, okay, in my experience, what are some of their characteristics? How did I prosper? Because I went from, as a 16-year-old, I went from having no experience in radio broadcasting to 6 months after I started having the #1 afternoon drive show in my market. I would literally finish school, drive my brother home, drop him off. Hurry up, get out. I got to go get on the air. So I kick him out. I'd slow down. It was okay. And then I'd go to work and work until 6, 7 o'clock, something like that. And 6 months later, I had the #1 afternoon drive show.
So cool. So you hit on something that we talk about on the show, which is resilience.
I've heard that.
Can you give like just a tiny bit of what made you resilient back when you were 9 that you pulled from to help you after your great big firing?
Yeah. It is so easy to wait for circumstances to carry us to success.
Right.
And if you wait for that, you're going to be waiting a pretty long time. Now, there are markets that anybody can sell anything in, and you've certainly been in those markets like I have. But then there are other markets, maybe like the one we're going through now, that are more challenging. So the adversity rears its head. As a 9-year-old, my adversity came along when I wanted to do what a lot of enterprising 9-year-olds want to do, and that is mow lawns and make a few bucks. What I discovered, Lynn's, was that I had severe allergies to mowing grass, and so much so that it became a viral infection in my lungs. So much so that I wound up in Duke University Hospital
Mm.
for a week. Which now, if you stay in the hospital a week, it's like unheard of. But then
You're
they'd actually
really
leave
sick.
you in the hospital for a little while.
Yeah.
So, just so fortunate to have the world's foremost asthma allergy pediatrician right there on staff at Duke. And I can remember one night under a mist tent. Now, if you're not looking at the video here, I've been around for a little while, and so back then Marcus Welby was on TV, and
Sure.
everybody that ever got under a mist tent on Marcus Welby died. It seemed like to me. So they put me under a mist tent, Lynn's, and so I'm thinking, holy smokes, I'm about to die. Well, once they said, no, you'll be okay. The medicine they put into the mist in the tent, I was allergic to that also.
Oh no.
And so here I am coughing my brains out, turning blue under the tent. My mom's dragging the residents in there, saying, hey, something, this is
Yeah,
not
this isn't
normal.
right.
They didn't listen, they were just following orders. And so I remember my mom reaching up under that mist tent, taking my little hand and saying, Joey, I'm positive you're going to make it through the night. Because I had overheard the resident tell her I was not going to make it through the night. Or
Mm.
if I made it through the night, Dr. Dees would see me the next morning. So I'm not only obviously made it through, the rest of the story.
You're here.
I'm still here. 50 some odd years later. So I made it through that. I had enough good sense not to mow grass anymore, but I began selling inscribed Christmas cards door to door.
Mhm.
Sales Leadership Club. It was amazing. Brown envelope came in the mail one day. It was a gift from heaven. So I'm running around nowadays, if you get a Christmas card and somebody actually handwrites in it, it's a big deal. Nowadays, if you get a Christmas card, period, it's a big deal. Secondly, if it's handwritten, it's a big deal. Back then, an inscribed Christmas card was something else. So here I am in August in Eastern North Carolina selling Christmas cards door to door, talking about Frosty and Rudolph, and it's 100 degrees and 100% humidity, and people are actually buying boxes of cards from me. So I got a 3-speed bike, which was the latest technology then. I got a cassette recorder, which was the latest technology then, and I got a telescope. By the way, I just got rid of the telescope about 5 years ago. So, and so I found a way not only to be resilient but to thrive despite my personal adversity. So that was my first foray with learning resilience. By the way, the reason I got into broadcasting was because in the mid 70s, the textile firm my dad was a data processing manager for, was bought by a foreign interest who sucked the cash out of it. And his job was gone. So I had to go to college. I mean, I wanted to go to college, so I had to have a way to pay for it. That's how I just walked in and
Awesome.
said, hi, I'd like to be on the radio.
I love that. And for folks that are on video, Dr. Joey has not been hit across the side of the head with a large blunt object. He just has some special cream that's just getting rid of some chemo cells, or not some cancerous cells, right?
Yeah, it's
Don't be alarmed.
a chemo cream. By the way, if your doc prescribes it, be prepared to feel like you have the flu.
Attention, visionary leaders. Are you ready to elevate your leadership style and create an exceptional workplace that stands out from the crowd? I'm here to introduce you to a game-changing resource that will transform the way you lead and shape your company culture. It's time to embrace the power of top-down culture. This practical guide empowers your leadership for lasting success, helping you create a workplace where everyone thrives. Get top-down culture today, and let's reshape the future of leadership together.
Who knew?
Yeah.
You're putting it on your face.
Yeah.
Anyway, Yeah.
Well, I just
So,
wanted to acknowledge that for the rest of the crowd so they understand, but it's really not a big deal. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit, and
okay.
can you share what are the 5 characteristics of work positive dream teams?
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. There are 5 core practices that I discovered from Great Depression gurus back in '07 and '08 when the world came to a halt. And we were all sitting at home wondering how we're going to make a living. I started doing research and found 5 core practices from Great Depression gurus who created thriving businesses or endured the Great Depression, an economic, not a medical term back then in the 20s and 30s. One of those core practices I call the conceive core practice, which has to do with relationships, and we can unpack that as much as you want to. But one of the key qualities that I found were these, what I call work positive dream teams. So the 5 qualities, and these are off the resume, Linz. You got to hire for the technical skills and things like that. I get that. But these are at least 5 key characteristics that work positive dream teams have, who are high performing, who are innovative, creative, and for whom work is fulfilling. The first is listen. And if you really want to unpack that, is active listening. And I'm an executive coach certified by ICF as a PCC. So we can talk all about active listening,
Sure.
as long as you want to listen. So anyway, it's, are you waiting to talk, or are you really
Preparing
listening?
your next thought.
Yeah, exactly. Or as Dr. Covey was fond of saying, listening to understand. So that's the first one. The second one after you listen is humility. And I mentioned humility earlier. Life has a way of helping us learn humility.
Sure
Humility, I think the basis of that, and we were talking about self-awareness and transformation earlier, is really that ability to transform from me to we. And so when my ego takes a back seat, and it doesn't have to be about me, and my insecurities aren't on full parade for everyone, then we can look at different set of metrics. As my friend Jody Thompson talks about, we can look at results results only, instead of the kinds of things that we're having all these conversations today about. I want your butt in the seat in my office for X number of hours a day, those kinds of things. So that's the first one is listening. The second one is humility. The third one is mutual benefit. My favorite example of mutual benefit is I live on a little 22-acre farm, and we have horses and dogs, deer, and squirrels. My wife loves feeding the birds, particularly in the winter. So, in fact, just this past weekend, she said to me, "Hey, we need to get out the bird feeders." Okay. So squirrels love bird seed about as much as birds do. And I have no love loss with squirrels. I'll just admit it. This is not
I'm
a
in the same camp.
Yeah, it's like, this is not a psychologically safe conversation for squirrels, or if you're a squirrel lover. So I'm just saying that up front right now.
Squirrels, it
I
would be a
call
good
them
time
tree
to tune
rats.
out.
Yeah, that's right. Just take a pause. Tree rats. That's what I call them. Anyway, this company created what was supposed to be the ultimate squirrel-proof bird feeder, and it had a little counterweight on it. And what would happen would be something as light as, and you can adjust the tension on it, something as light as a bird sits on the front of it, and then a bird can eat all at once. But if something as heavy as a squirrel sits on that bar, then the counterweight on the back goes up, and the gate closes in front of the seed. So allegedly the squirrel gets frustrated and leaves, unless there are 2 squirrels, in which case one squirrel will sit on the counterweight on the back of the feeder, while squirrel 2 sits on the front of the feeder. And
they can balance it.
Her heart's content. And then, Linz, they switch places. I observed this. So I'm like, if squirrels can do that, we humans can stand a slight chance of, instead of making it all about me, make it about we, and really work together for mutual benefit, not only for the company, but for the company, the vendors, the clients and customers. Everybody can benefit from more than a transaction. It becomes a transformation. So there's a relationship there. So listen, humility, mutual benefit. The fourth one I went right to the fifth one in my mind, and I skipped right over the fourth one. You got the list in front of you there, so I can.
I'm writing it down.
You're right. That's not helpful. All right,
No.
I'll go to the fifth one. The fifth one is the golden rule. The fourth one's accountability. There you go. I need to hold myself accountable for remembering these, right? The fourth one is accountability. Now, so often when somebody says, Lynn, hey, let's enter into an accountability relationship or something like that. I mean, I get to, for so many of us, we kind of seize up at that and go, you're going to bust my chops every time I make a mistake, right? Instead, accountability on a work positive dream team is having just enough pressure, putting just enough pressure on someone to bring out the best in them.
Yeah.
And so, like a rubber band, if it's too much pressure, it's going to snap it. If it's just enough pressure, then it can hold cards or papers or whatever you want it to do. The fifth one is the golden rule. The golden rule works, work the golden rule. Of course, we're all also familiar with the platinum rule. But I think first one needs to understand oneself and what works for oneself. And then once that gets satisfied, that you get clarity around that, then I can securely reach out to you and be concerned with what it is that you want and how I can help you get it. So those are the 5 key characteristics of work positive dream teams.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And then you talk about attention being the scarcest resource we have. What do you mean by that? I mean, I kind of know, I have teenagers, so I kind of know what you mean, but share in your eloquent way of speaking.
So how many times do you have to speak to a toddler, a teenager, or a teenager? The only difference is hormones, by the way. How many times do you have to speak to a toddler or a teenager to get their attention, right? Man, the great battlefield today is for our attention. There's, I saw the study, but I didn't read the latest study on how many impressions we're bombarded with daily. In fact, I sequester myself in the mornings away from all attempts to gain my attention. Attention is the scarcest resource because everywhere you go, there's something or someone trying to get your attention.
Sure.
And so you become multifaceted, multitasking, all of which is a great myth, by the way, in terms of productivity. When you're in the flow, go read the book. When you're in the flow, man, you are focused. Your attention it's not myopic, but it's just focused on the task at hand, and it's feeding you and you're feeding it, and you go back and forth. So yeah, the great battlefields for the mind, and attention is the great resource that we're all competing for today.
So talk a little bit about the book and why the title, Small Hinges Swing Big Doors. What does that mean?
Yeah, well, Jim Collins wrote From Good to Great a long time ago. He's thus far sold more copies than I have of all my books put together just out of that one book. So it was an amazing book. I absolutely loved it. I'm visionary. And so I'm reading about BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals. And I'm thinking, yeah, I'm going to bring out the best in myself. I'm going to set these BHAGs. And I do. And I always achieve more than I would have otherwise. However, I discovered in leading teams and working with virtual assistants and other people around the world that I work with, not everybody's a BHAGger. In fact, I think in the battlefields for the mind, right, and attention is the scarcest resource. I think I'm not going to say I think, it is far easier to focus myself and to help someone else focus on one thing.
Sure.
Now, BHAGs versus one thing. I mean, okay. But those small hinges swing huge doors if you do one thing to create a positive work culture daily. Let me just pick one thing to do today and do that. And then the next day you can do it again, or you can choose something else to do. So the whole notion of small hinges swinging big doors came from when I mentioned we live on a little horse farm. I was rehabbing the barn up here. My wife wanted different doors for the horse stalls. So, of course, whatever she wants, that's what I'm doing. And so massive doors, and they must weigh 532 pounds each. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to need some really big hinges. So I go to Lowe's and I got my dimensions of my door and I got an approximate weight, 532 pounds of the door. And so I go into Lowe's and I'm like, okay, whatever the guy's name was, we'll say it was Johnny. Okay, Johnny, don't ask me why these guys are always named Johnny. But anyway, okay, Johnny, I'm going to need a really big hinge for this, I bet, because, this door is massive and all this. And I'm going to need like a 5-foot hinge or something. And Johnny looks at me and says, Dr. Joey, small hinges swing big doors. Come over here and let me show you these hinges. They'll do the trick for you. And guess what? This was not Johnny's first rodeo. He was right. I came in, he told me how to leverage the door and hold it in place. And so this one guy with very little carpentry experience put these two little hinges on, these two small hinges, and that was 25 years ago. And
they're still swinging.
They're still swinging. So swing big, but understand that it's a small action that's going to allow you to swing big.
Well, and the accumulation of many small actions, chipping away day by day, checking off one thing at a time, really does yield some big results. And it's hard to see at the beginning, but the more you do it and the more you apply, the farther you're going to get. And it's about being consistent. It's about following through. It's about setting goals for yourself and seeing the progress. So I get it. And I love
celebrating it.
I love that image of the small hinges swinging big doors. I think
and it's a short book too. So it's not like you have to sit down, and say 5.5 hours later, I'll be through listening to it. No, it's under 100 pages. So the book literally fits the concept of small hinges swing big doors.
I love it. I love a good small business book. That's great. I can't wait to read it. So talk a little bit about your show, because you've got this really successful podcast. I was a guest. I was so happy to be a guest. Tell the audience what it is, where they can find it.
The pleasure's mine to have you on, and your episode's coming up really soon. Well, it's heard wherever you're listening to this podcast or other fine podcasts, right? Wherever fine podcasts are heard, like Lyndsay's. The Work Positive podcast is heard as well. Also, we have a website, workpositive.today, and every one of my guests gets their own page. So, you'll have your own page on our website. It'll be workpositive.today/Lyndsay-Dowd. And so just go ahead and type that in now.
What kinds of things do you cover on it? Because if they haven't listened to my episode, I want them to listen.
Well, I talk to people who are just amazingly brilliant, like yourself, with varied backgrounds in different industries, but all of whom are committed to one thing. And this is sort of the sleeper strategy behind the podcast. And that is the maximizing of human potential in workplaces and creating workplaces that are positive. So we talk about, there are 5 basic questions. How do you best attract top talent? How do you reduce team turnover? How do you measure for positivity in a work culture? Fourthly, what are some of the challenges that you face in creating a positive work culture? And then 5th, I ask for one thing. What's one thing Work Positive Nation can do today to create a positive work culture? And that gives the listeners, something at the end of 30 minutes. Here's an action I can go take today. And man, there've been some amazing people in addition to you. Jesse Cole, the owner of Savannah Bananas, was one of my early guests.
Oh, I love them.
Oh my God, they've blown up the whole world. Now they're
so
in the
fun.
Hall of Fame, right? And a bunch of their stuff is. But back then, there were only about 200,000 people on their ticket waiting list. Now they're like 200 million.
Oh my God.
Ticket waiting list. But I had a chance to meet him in person recently at the Durham Bulls ballpark in Durham, North Carolina.
So fun.
Great guy. Also interviewed his wife, Emily. By the way, shout out for Jesse and Emily. They've got a biological child, and then they are fostering 2 other children. So they have started an organization called, you ready for this? Bananas Foster. Bananasfoster.org. Isn't that just the most awesome name of a nonprofit? And so you can go to bananasfoster.org and give, and they support families who are fostering children.
I love that. That's so cool.
I know.
Well, you are so kind with everybody that is around you, and everyone that I know that knows you would agree with that, but has experienced your amazing heart and your drive and determination to create a better world and a more positive place. So thank you for all of that. So what inspires you, Dr. Joey?
What inspires me?
Mm,
Uh, there's a 3.5-year-old little girl who calls me Pops that
yes.
is asleep right now upstairs in our home in her nap bed, as she calls it. Boy, she inspires me so much. And I mean, my wife and I raised two daughters, but it's been a few years. So to reacquaint myself with a 3.5-year-old, almost 4-year-old's energy, curiosity,
So good.
just a certain sense of awe and wonder at the world. Man,
Mm,
that's what I want to be like. I want to know why things work the way they do. I want to show interest in people. I want to play and have fun with people. And I'm
mhm.
convinced that work can be all that. So
I think so
just
too.
trying that's what inspires me.
Oh, I
That
love
little
that.
girl.
And what would you like your legacy to be?
That little girl. And any others that maybe
On their way?
added
Yeah.
added later. Yeah, well, you said my legacy. In fact, I'm going to go back and write that down. You said my legacy uh, so well a moment ago. My
Mm,
friend Mitchell Levy refers to it as cred dust.
mm.
He's the founder of Credibility Nation, and so it's kind of like pixie dust. Cred dust. We're just, you know, I've talked about Jesse and Emily Cole, Mitchell
Sure.
Levy, mentioned Jim Collins. So just talking about other people, not making all the conversations about me. I hope when my time here is done, that's my legacy. That people
Mhm.
say, not only was Joey kind, but he really saw the best and called out the best in others.
Well, I think you do that every day. And I think that just the nature of your work positive movement is giving back
Hmm.
goodness, kindness, a better way, a way that teaches leaders how to evolve, which is
Yeah.
so much of what I believe in too. So I
Hmm.
love that you do that. That's also why we were such kindred spirits the moment we met.
Yeah,
So
I
I love
know.
that. So what is next for you? What are you hoping to, what's like short-term future and big-term future?
Oh, wow. Well, short term, we're putting the finishing touches on my next book, another short book,
Nice.
which is called Do One Thing.
Mm,
And 15 of my podcast guests who I took their one thing that they said and then unpack that for the
mhm.
readers. Again, it's under 100 pages. And the goal is to produce at least one of those books a year because, yourself, when you do a weekly podcast, you're around all these amazing people.
Oh my
So
God,
why
yeah.
just put it in a podcast? Why not do something else with it?
So
So short
smart.
term, you can go to Amazon and look under my name, Dr. Joey, and find Do One Thing dot. And so that'll be the next book. And you might as well go ahead and pick up Small Hinges, Swing Big Doors too,
Why
because you can
not?
read. Yeah, well, you can read both of them in a couple of hours, right? It's easy to read. Long term, I referred to myself as a curator earlier. I am meeting so many incredible people like you, Linz, and I'm discovering the need is so great for creating positive work cultures, and
Yeah.
people are literally crying out for it, that it's more than I can do by myself.
Yep.
So I'm partnering with people like you and other experts in the field of culture and people particularly who are disruptive with culture
Hmm.
and want to create a more because being positive is disruptive, right?
Yeah. Well, and
Instead of
anything we can do to create this tidal wave of goodness and possibility, I think
mm,
is so good. It's so needed and people are hungry for it. I think people have been struggling. We saw it with the great resignation. Then we saw the great layoff. I mean, it's not
yeah,
getting any better
nope,
anytime soon. So
no,
we've got to fix it. And all of, big corporate America is being asked to do more with less.
yep,
And the decisions they're making are like, ugh, like take my breath away, painful.
yeah,
And
it's like
it feels like the wrong direction. So
oh, it's
I think
totally
you're
the wrong
right.
direction.
There is such a need for this kind of work. And that's why you and I get asked to speak. That's why we're getting
Mm,
asked to come in and coach. And
mm.
thank you for doing that and for setting a good example because I think we need more of it. So that's why I wanted you
Thanks
on the
so much.
show.
The Small Hinges, Swing Big Doors short book is actually the introduction to a course, Small Hinges, Swing Big Doors. So it's SHRM. We're a SHRM recertification provider. So if you're SHRM, you can pick up some, what do they call them, PDCs. Um, we also are a level 1 ICF coach training program. And so we have a companion continuing education piece for that. So this will
Great.
fall under resource development for you there. So if you want to go to workpositive.today/small hinges, you can find the first culture course from the Work Positive Academy. And you can begin this journey with us to create a work positive movement.
Guys, if you are not connected to Dr. Joey, not following him, or you haven't explored Work Positive, get on it. You are about to be enlightened and entertained and encouraged to do good things. And Dr. Joey, it has been such a pleasure and such a joy. I only wish I had another half hour until I keep going. Because we could talk about squirrel bird feeders for a while. I've got a lot of videos I need to send you.
Yeah. Well, living on a farm, I love living next to nature. And so I've got all sorts of stories about far more interesting creatures than squirrels, like horses and dogs.
Yes. Well, how do folks find you?
Go to workpositive.today. I've got a free course on there, something to talk about. LinkedIn, we virtually live on LinkedIn.
That's right.
Just so many people there. We do webinars once a quarter on LinkedIn, free webinars to help people. And so either of those two places where I can be found. And when I'm not on workpositive.today or LinkedIn, I'm with that little granddaughter and we're out feeding nays or walking around the farm.
I love
fun.
it.
Yep.
Dr. Joey, you're the best. Thank you so much for being a guest on the show. And everyone, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Heartbeat for Hire. Take care of yourselves and see you soon. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Heartbeat for Hire podcast. If you liked what you heard, please consider leaving a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I would be ever so grateful. I hope you found it useful. Have a wonderful day.